How many people are aware of now whether their local high school has an esports team? Right? Okay, I'm seeing a few. There's probably more of that than you think. Right now, there's about 98,000 high schools in North America that have an esports team or are forming one. In addition to that, we've got a little over 1,400 colleges that offer programs, and about 339 of them have esports scholarships now. So it's growing, and it's growing at a large rate. So there's a huge amount of competition out there for kind of those top slots. And kind of the final thing that kind of brings this all together is traditional sports, say if we look at Major League Baseball or something like that, took 100 years to get to Moneyball type techniques. Esports doesn't have that time. I used to say they have maybe 5-6 years. I think they've got 2 left. People are really starting to dig into this deeper. So that kind of brings us to how do we start to use some techniques to be able to help bring this data to the actual community in its entirety. And the approach that we've used at Omnic AI is actually to use computer vision and deep learning techniques to be able to extract that information. One of the things that is unique about this, and we can talk about whether it's a plus or a minus, is the player awareness. So the way we do computer vision is we're doing it from that player's viewpoint. So as I'm in Valorant, looking, down the map or aiming down sight, something like that, I don't know where enemy operators are or ones that are off screen, what they're up to. If I go with a data pull that maybe that Riot can provide, that would have all that information in it. And so inherently, that I might make different decisions just based off of knowing stuff that I should not know about when I'm actually playing the game. And so with that in mind, we think the computer vision approach is very appropriate to the individual player. For the team approach, that overall kind of data pull or team view winds up being a richer data source. All right. There's also a lot of API uncertainty out there. For instance, Riot has been very good at supplying APIs for data, but there have been other developers out there who have had APIs and then pulled them. And so suddenly people are going, well, how do I see or measure what my improvement is? The advantage with computer vision is, as long as a player can see the game, we can pull that data from that screen. In addition, it allows us to really pull some novel data sources. So if you can think of some things, and I know we don't have very many Valorant players, but maybe we have some in another game that kind of understand what a team fight is or what poke damage is. Those are hard to extract from just a pure data API, whereas with computer vision, we can actually notice, look, the entire opposing team is on the screen, everyone's exchanging fire, that is a team fight. And so we can easily bring that in as a vector into the data that we'll be analyzing. Anybody have any questions on kind of the computer vision problem, or if they think there's a better way? All right, so with this, we need to collect that data. And this is the most difficult part of getting started with any of these kind of computer vision problems that exist. Even like a self-driving car, right? Somebody's got to sit down and say, well, what's important? And so with this, that's one of the things that we've had to invest a lot of time and energy into, is going through and labeling data sets. We'll talk about kind of what we do to do that and how we've been able to, increase the speeds on that. But that becomes a crucial issue, and we keep revisiting it. As an example, with Valorant now, we've got labeled data sets with about 380 different parameters that we're pulling in at any given time. And that's a lot more than when we started, where when we started, we might have had, I don't know, 60. The more relevant data that you can find, then it makes your analysis easier in the end. And you'll see that as we kind of go through some of the examples. And then with that, we also seed our AI. And when I say seed, what we're looking for is actually talking to professionals or coaches that exist out there and saying, hey, sit down with us, let's go through some game footage and tell us where are the key moments in this game where different plays were made or different actions were taken that affected the outcome of the game. And what we've been able to do is seed the AI with those specific instances, and then as we collect more data, the AI begins to notice other similar instances and can pull that out and say, okay, this is where the probability of win increases or decreases for that team. All right? So I know we don't have many Valorant players here. Do people know the different roles that exist in Valorant? Initiator, Sentinel, Duelist? Okay. So what do you think might be some appropriate data elements that we might be able to use for a Sentinel? Anything? Come on, somebody's got to have one. Even a simple one like, yeah. Yeah, utility placement. That's a great one, right? So whenever they're using one of their abilities and where that utility gets placed. Other ones that are very, very generic are just where they are on the map, their location. In addition, who on their team or the opposing team is alive or dead. Also, who are their team members? Because there's certain utility that when paired with another team member's utility, they give a great advantage in the game. And so those types of information are very useful. In addition to that, we keep track of all the utility charge states, so on and so forth. And so you can track that kind of on a round by round basis. Another one that is big in the game of Valorant that you don't see in other games is, they call it economy. And between each round, there's a chance to purchase weapons or abilities, and you do that with credits that you've earned in prior rounds. And so often it can be a trade-off to say, look, we just need to lose this round. Don't worry about it. It's just a complete pass, and then we'll have better economy going into the next round and be able to win that one. So, our data collection techniques. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, CVAT, Computer Vision Annotation Tool. Great tool. IBM put it out there several years ago. That's kind of the basis for starting. You can see here a screen of CVAT, and basically what you get to do is draw boxes and then label everything on the screen as, oh, I want to track this. Oh, what is this? And you can see here how we're able to, label and track the kill feed, the different players up at the top of the screen, how much ammunition you have left, so on and so forth, as well as when opponents appear on the screen. And it's something that we could do as an exercise in the workshop, but to be quite honest, it gets very repetitive and boring. It's something that has to be done, and everyone out there looks for pre-labeled data sets because it's just time intensive and does take a while. But that's where it all starts. From there, once you've labeled your data sets, we can move on to actually building a convolutional neural net. And that convolutional neural net can essentially be able to pull out and recognize different items going on in those labeled data sets, as well as being able to pick up on interrelations between the data. And there's kind of an offshoot of that, the graph neural network, which is really good at taking a look at multiple kind of CNN type data as it goes in. So that gets used quite frequently. In addition, there's just the standard old optical character recognition models, right? So it can be as simple as reading the number for your ammunition left. And now you just use OCR to say, oh, they've got, 23 shots left, that kind of thing. And then in addition to that, OpenCV, a great open source project. I'd encourage anyone that's looking into any sort of computer vision thing to start there. They've got a lot of great starting points and models available. And as an example, humanoid character movement. So this is great because they can tell you, okay, as I'm tracking that opponent, are they standing, crouching, running, sliding, jumping, those kinds of things. And you can pull that data into the system. All right, so at Omnic, we take all of that, and then what we're able to do is provide individual analysis to an individual player. And that includes things like I'll show you here, where we're able to pull out a player card, highlight clips, and different coaching tips. In fact, we've delivered over 500,000 coaching tips to our users so far. And those coaching tips, you'll notice, are far more data rich than anything that you'd get from an API pull, right? When they're telling you things like, coordinate with your ally deadlock to make sure you're using GravNet in key areas on a particular map, as an example. Does that make sense to anybody that doesn't play Valorant? Okay. In addition to that, we're able to provide an AI-based summary that can tell you, okay, based on your data and your performance in this game, here's some things that you can focus on. And then, of course, we provide an interactive, question and answer to be able to ask it for more details on a particular item if you'd like. Now, keep in mind, as we kind of talk about that labeling of the data and being able to draw those boxes. So what this is now allowing is, just like a self-driving car would track, a dog starting to run across the road ahead of you, we can now track as opponents appear on the screen, or even allies or team members. And so with that, we provide an aim analysis tool. And this tool is actually, if you look at this and picture that box as a screen, each one of those marks are where an opponent has appeared on the screen. And then in addition, we tell you whether you targeted them, whether you targeted their body, or whether you targeted their head. And in addition, we can provide you the exact time to target for each one of those. And as you can imagine, at the upper levels, this becomes incredibly crucial because every millisecond counts. In addition to that, we group them. So you can see here in the bottom right, in that quadrant, it's telling this user that their average time to target down to the right is 191 milliseconds. I highlighted that one in particular because all the other quadrants were around 30 to 70 milliseconds. So this shows that that user has a harder time dragging the mouse down and to the right. So they should probably pre-aim down and to the right because they're faster moving up and to the left. As we talked about earlier, we can also then provide a timeline of all the events that are going on, such as what your ability charges are at a given time. You can see their allies and opponents, what weapon you've got equipped, what your health is, and then what your economy was during each round. This is incredibly useful for coaching, and especially VOD review after each match, because they can then match this up. We also have additional just statistics and community comparison. And I really want to highlight this other thing, which I encourage each one of you to do when you leave the workshop, is if you go and get your own analysis, you can download the data at any time and analyze it in the way you want to analyze it. And we think that's really important to enable individuals and teams to be able to take a look and slice and dice it any way they'd like to. We also have quite a few more features that go into some career stuff and workshop. As we get into the example that I'll show you here in a bit, what's really unique with this is we look across all these different metrics and analyze your performance. And you'll see here that in your teams, for this player, in their team's defensive rounds, the one thing that makes a difference on whether their team wins or not is this player should focus on eliminations. So they should be out trying to eliminate the opponents. If you look at their offensive rounds, first bloods are the primary importance. So basically, anytime this player on the team eliminates an opponent first before anyone else is eliminated, that greatly increases their chances to win. And so what's really unique with this is you can quickly matchmake then with other players and learn how to basically synthesize or get the greatest amount out of your different play styles and abilities. We've got a staff member who, it turns out, in defensive rounds, the one thing he should focus on more than anything is wall bangs, which is not something that you would normally think of in a game, but it's incredibly useful. In addition, with team analysis, we're able to provide all sorts of different insight from that data. This is just like an example of opening elimination heat maps. So this is a professional team that won't be named, but you can see here in any given match where they had the greatest number of opening eliminations and on different maps. And this helps them for their placements and calling their plays. As I mentioned, we also have that VOD assist, so we can provide timestamps to each of those major events, so on and so forth. So with that, I kind of want to take us into an example here. So what we're going to do is take a look at a study that one of our great data science staff members, Sophia Cafone, did along with Philip Bogdan at Northeastern University. And basically the question is here, what should you focus on to win a round of Valorant? Are there certain characters, maps that lead to a win? And does the focus change? And how does it focus? So for those of you that might not be familiar with Valorant, there are different rounds where you're either on the attack or on the defense. And in addition to that, there's a thing called the spike that you either plant or you are trying to prevent them from planting if you're on the defense. It's very nuanced because then once you're an attacker and you've planted that spike, you almost go into a defense mode to stop the other team from being able to disarm that spike or eliminate all your team members. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into that, what is a win? All right? And with this, as we talked about a little bit earlier with your classes, is there a particular thing that you should focus on as a class, right? Does that change how you might play the game to win in Valorant? Any questions before we kind of head into this? Yep. Do you pull data from the mini-map as well? We do. So, right, we're tracking, we've drawn a lot of boxes around mini-maps as an example. So the data here that we're using is from about 30,000 rounds or sorry, I should say 30,000 matches of Valorant gameplay. It's from professional Valorant streamers only. We captured it from their gameplay streams, and then we brought that data in as time series events, and it's completely independent from the game's API. And once again, this is with Omnics, like what I would say is limited information space, but one that we think is more valuable because it's truly from that player's viewpoint and only with data that that player would know about. So, as in any kind of data science project, right? So we've got to go through and normalize the data, parse it. There's some binning that we've gone through, looked at some unique features, remapped, and then cleaned it up. You can see here kind of the approach that was taken. All of it was very carefully done. And the nice part is we thought we'd have a lot more cleaning to do, and we just didn't. We were able to capture, almost all the relevant information that we had wanted to capture. So with that, as we talked about a little bit earlier, so these are some examples. So we're looking at like max health lost, average damage dealt, team health information, map percentage covered, eliminations, deaths, what weapon you used the most, placement of your team members on the map, where they were at a given time. All of that has been fed in. So if you can imagine, a data point that you probably, I don't know if that has an effect or not. We've gone ahead and just put it in to see if it changes the model at all. So this is where we get to our first thing, right? So we talked about, are certain agents or maps more likely to lead to a win? And depending on how much Valorant you've played and what your personal preference, might be, there's people who are always saying, oh, that map is unbalanced or not fair. What's kind of interesting here is we didn't see a huge variation. If we just look for a whole match, map didn't really come into play. In fact, it kind of shows it's a well-balanced game overall. Likewise, we saw some variation in the different agents that were picked and maybe the different classes. But what's really interesting with this, and I'll show it here a little bit later, is we started to take out things that were player choice. For example, since you choose your agent at the beginning, well, maybe you're just more comfortable playing that agent and you've got more time, playing with that agent. So once we were able to pull that out, there's not a large discrepancy there either. So it leads us to a really much more complex and nuanced problem. So once again, if you're on the attacking side, you win by planting the spike, and it detonates, or you eliminate all the opponents, right? But if you're on the defending side, you either win by deactivating that planted spike, eliminating all the opponents, or just surviving without the spike being planted. So once again, there's a nuance there of sometimes on defense, all you have to do is survive. It's a first-person shooter game, but you don't have to eliminate anybody. If you can just stay alive, it can lead to a chance of winning. So we wanted to take a look at how those things played out. So for the data scientists out there, right, so we used a logistic regression to take a look. It seemed to be a decent model. We also looked at a few others, but turns out the logistic regression gave us kind of the same results. So it's the easy one to kind of go through here. So in all of these, basically our F1 scores were between 90 and 95%. So we're fairly confident on these. Now, what's really interesting here is you can see that essentially deaths and eliminations wound up being the thing that drove each of these rounds more than anything. And you kind of go, oh, well, that's obvious. right? Once again, it's a little bit more nuanced, and if we took out deaths, what we wound up seeing is, and taking a look at on attack and defense, what we started to kind of pull out of there is that often health and your number of teammates alive wound up being a more important driver. So it wasn't necessarily focusing on eliminations, it was focusing on just being able to hold in the game and stay alive a little longer. Any questions so far? So then what we wanted to do is say, well, wait, does this change? What if we break this down into pre-spike and post-spike? And sure enough, you can see we had some great changes in pre-spike and post-spike. And you can see here how post-spike, it really was, your health and you staying alive. That's all that mattered. Getting an elimination after the spike was planted just really had very little effect on the game. And I think that's interesting to see how it kind of changes that nuance. You can imagine in football, if it wound up being like something where, oh, look, we did the analysis and the extra points never matter. No one would focus on them at all, right? All right, so with roles, same thing. We wanted to take a look and see, where, is it possible to classify a player by their play style into a particular role that they fall? And roles in Valorant are a little loose, right? They're not like some other games where they say, look, your team has to be 2 tanks and 2 supports and 2 ADSs. Instead, they just say, yeah, build your team with what you like. And each of them has that are in the role has a little bit different nuance to how their utility can be used. So it's not like you can easily say, oh, well, you're obviously a sentinel or you're obviously an initiator. And so with that, we thought, yeah, but there's got to be a way to say, hey, this is your play style. You really should be, a controller. So with this, we wound up, same thing. We used a linear regression, got terrible results. So we wound up using a decision tree. And this helped us to really kind of dive a little bit better into the data and be able to, pull out the predictions based on the average value of these different target variables. And so this is what's interesting here is the best test accuracy we were able to get was about an 82%. Not as high as we'd like, but decent. And what we saw there is basically based on your application of your abilities or your utility, that is the thing that really defines what character or role you're better at. So it's your familiarity with the utility of that particular character or agent. It is not necessarily anything else to do with the play style. As an example, we kind of thought that, oh, well, initiators, that must be, first bloods must be a large driver for initiators. No, it really isn't. Even though they're called an initiator, they really don't do more first blood than any other class. I'll leave this up for a bit just so you can see just a different way to basically kind of look at that data and see what the decision tree, how things were grouped out, essentially getting to the same results. So that brings us to kind of the conclusions with the data. And basically we think, the pre-processing that we can do can make accurate predictions. High-level gameplay strategy is consistent, but the details do change based on round characteristics, not on matches, but on each round. And that suddenly kind of changed the game for the way a lot of coaches began thinking about the games and going, okay, each round is a match in itself, and we need to look at things round by round. It's also possible to classify the Valorant players into roles based on gameplay features, but it's a subset of features, right? We found that, yeah, it's really just your utility usage. And then this kind of gives us a baseline to start with, you know, to work with some of this different kind of data. So with this, it's allowed us to do a lot of different follow-on projects that we've been working on now over the last year. And those really come down to team data analysis, right, and looking at team play. Also, as I kind of mentioned, we now have a real-time win probability prediction. So our AI is watching, and during every second or millisecond of the match, it's calculating what the probability of win is. And it's really neat when you can see that for your team as it's rising and falling based on the different actions. And this is very similar to, you know, what other people have presented here at the conference, you know, for, you know, looking at, you know, a football play or an NBA game, you know, kind of type thing. It also helps us, we can identify major events on the timeline and be able to timestamp video that way. And then the most interesting one to me is play style identification and thumbprinting. So what we've started working with now is taking all that data, feeding it in, and basically building you kind of a digital thumbprint, and then doing that with different professional players and different streamers that are out there. And with that, we can actually notice if in a particular game, even though you might be Silver 4 and not anywhere close to Radiant, we can actually identify and say, hey, congratulations, you know, during that 10 seconds of that game, you played just like Tens. Or, you know, you were just like, you know, you exhibit the same play style as Forsaken. And, you know, go take a look at how they play. And that can help you perform and increase your performance that way. I invite each and every one of you, like I said, go access your data today, forge.omnic.ai. You can sign up, and we have a free account that's available where you can see your last 5 matches, but you can download your data anytime you want, kind of thing. And then we have premium plans that go up from there. And with that, I have questions, and thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so actually, computer vision is really important in each of those examples. For instance, with the role-based, right, where we noticed its utility usage. Because even though an API can pull out and say, oh, you used your utility here, right, it's more of knowing in the context as you're looking at the screen and maybe communicating with a teammate, if you're trying to coordinate your utility at the same time, right? Like knowing that, okay, we're doing that without knowing where maybe the other players are or the opposing players are or what their utility is, right? Because you don't know what they've got charged necessarily. You might, because you might have been kind of keeping track of, oh, they haven't used, you know, their GravNet, you know, so obviously he must have it now. No, it's a good question, though. Yep.
I have 2 questions. So when you were doing your... Thank you. When you were doing your market research and kind of reaching out to these teams and coaches, did you find them to be responsive to, you know, your business? were there kind of barriers there?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. Honestly, it was about a 50-50 mix. A lot of teams were like, yeah, we've got our own internal data team, right? And then other people saying, well, wait, so we don't have a data team, but could we use something like this, right?
Sure.
Once again, I think what's important is even though we've worked with teams and some of these professional level, we don't view that as our essentially market. Our market is the everyday gamer that is trying to get better, right? That wants bragging rights to their friends, or is on a high school team trying to get a college scholarship, or in college trying to go pro, something like that.
Yeah, and then thank you. And then the second question I had is the feasibility for the live game results. You mentioned real-time win probability. Could you talk about some of those statistics that go in there? Because there's a lot of stats on the board and a lot of pre-processing that you clearly do, right? So that win in that live game win probability, is that events, or is that also including reaction time, weapon, character, so on and so forth?
It is. So it's including all 380 of those metrics that we've been talking about. What is interesting is even though we're capable of that real-time processing right now, we haven't exposed that to end users at all. And there's a very specific reason, right? We don't want somebody like Riot to start saying, hey, that's an external tool that gives you an unfair advantage, you're banned. So the idea is right now we provide all that information post-match. So it is more like a coach talking to you after the match is over.
Makes sense. Thank you.
When you were talking about the win rate per character, and you said you wanted to take out the preference part where people will choose. So how did you, take that part out? And if you take that part out, then how would you, what's the data, or how would you collect the data then? Would it be the players picking the characters by random, or can you explain on that?
Yeah. So what we did is essentially we made it blind, right? So we just pulled out that piece of data. So the agent ID or agent unique identifier was gone. What we did leave in was still role. So we knew if they were an initiator or a controller or whatever, but we just essentially removed the individual agent because that's where we saw the ups and those dips and peaks. So.
Okay, so you did a blind design on the person, on you guys, instead of on the person that was playing.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
So this would be another question about real-time analysis. So is there any reason that you have to do real-time? How are the players or the audiences are going to benefit from it apart from the post-match analysis that you already have?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we wanted to do that real-time analysis, or at least see if we could do it, right, is there might be a dual licensing model or another market that we might be going after here for instance, broadcasters, right? So just like you've seen with, on the NFL with the AWS next-gen stats, right? For us to be able to so a shoutcaster shoutcasting a match could say, yep, look, and their win probability just went up 35% with that last trade, that kind of thing. Yep.
It's funny. I was about to ask if there was any applications in terms of commentary. I don't know if you had anything else to talk about, because it's very obvious how this applies to individuals and team strategy, right? But I think sort of commentary of the game, and that's the best way to bring new players in, especially. So maybe specifically on how they could sort of take that advanced strategy.
We just did a pilot with HyperX Arena in Las Vegas, where their shoutcasters used our technology to be able to bring that, and the shoutcasters loved it because, once again, the data that they got from Riot was very much, oh, I can give you the KDAs, or, you know, we can go through like something like total damage done, or you know, how many eliminations, but those are very like, you know, baseline, like initial stuff. Yep. All right. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have a question. So you mentioned the target market is like your everyday gamer. So is this the type of thing where you envision, like I know the chess panels have, and I'm just learned about this with chess, but like everyone has their rating and you're like guessing the ratings and bragging to your friends if you have the higher rating. Is this what you envision, like the everyday gamer getting a rating, like a Valorant rating, Rocket League rating?
You know, yeah, so we've thought about that a lot, and we're actually sitting on the fence with it, because part of it is we're trying to be very inclusive to any gamer, and not make people feel like, oh, you know, God, I'm so low, like I'm not even going to play because I don't want to get started. So to that point, one of the things that we've done that we just started, we just released it like 2 weeks ago in our coaching tips kind of section. It goes to that thumbprinting. So as we've been thumbprinting players, we're now starting to bin them or cohort them. And so now we can kind of show you where you are in relation to your cohort without being like, yeah, you're in the lowest cohort that it, you know, plays. And in addition to that, we'll start to probably pull in some other stuff from, say, some of the publishers with their ranking systems. So at least you can go, okay, against all the silver 4s, this is where I'm at, or this is the, you know, where I sit. But what we do is you can add friends or rivals or professionals to basically this comparison page. And so you can click on them and you can compare yourself. Like if you want to compare yourself directly to 10s, you can do it. I can tell you, I don't like to do it because I'm terrible. Makes me look, you know, but I pick a friend and I can be like, hey, Kevin, look, I trashed you last week. Like, you're no good. That kind of thing. Yeah.